Hey everyone, welcome to another snow day. I hope you're enjoying your day. We are still going to take the test on Monday. So to get you ready for an SAQ type question that you're going to have, I'm going to cover the SAQ that you were supposed to do yesterday, and we'll work through that together. And hopefully you'll have a better understanding and be prepared for what I expect of you on Monday. So here we go. SAQ practice. The question that I gave you was the United States declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917. Explain the most significant reason for the US declaring war on Germany. Now, the first part of that is not really the question. Remember, in an SAQ, you have to answer the question. So the first thing that we really got to look at is what are the key points of this question? Explain the most significant reason for the US declaring war on Germany. Now, US declares war on Germany. And what is, in this case, says the most significant reason. So, in other words, what is the cause or the primary cause of the US declaring war on Germany? And you need to make sure that you explain that. So, point B, actually, question B was a bit tougher. And looking at your answers, I can see a lot of people missed it, but that's okay. It says, explain why another reason the US declared war on Germany was not as significant of a cause as the first reason. So whatever cause you chose up here for the first cause or the most significant cause of the US declaring war on Germany, pick another cause and explain why that one, not just explain that one, but explain why it's not as significant or as important as the first one that you chose. So a lot of students messed up on that. But that's okay. That's why we're working on these things. So let's take a look at how you might answer that first question. So first thing we got to do before we write is decide, okay, the U.S. declared war on Germany. Why? In class, we gave you 4 reasons. First reason was the sinking of the Lusitania. Second reason was British propaganda. Third reason was the resuming of unrestricted submarine warfare. And the fourth reason was the Zimmermann telegram. So in AP US history, and really in history, you can really argue that any of those 4 was the most significant reason. And if you use evidence, you can be correct. So let's take a look at some options that you could have had. So here's some good options or good ways you could have answered this question. The most significant cause of the U.S. declaration of war on Germany was the success of British propaganda that swayed American opinion against Germany. So this one is saying it's British propaganda was the most significant cause. American opinion was overwhelmingly against getting involved early in the war, but British propaganda that exaggerated German atrocities and portrayed them as violent and evil turned that opinion in favor of getting involved by 1917. Therefore, when the Germans resumed unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmermann telegram was uncovered, the American politicians were ready to declare war. So it's basically saying, look, British propaganda, it was the reason to sway American opinions, which eventually led to the politicians declaring war. Now, notice in this answer, it specifically answers the question. It says, what is the most significant cause? This answer definitely chooses British propaganda, and it explains that what British propaganda did. Turned American opinion against the Germans. One other thing it could have done, it had more space, was it could have mentioned that the British cut the Germans' telegram cables to the United States. Well, British ones still survived, but just didn't have enough time for that answer here. Notice it uses terminology like British propaganda. Notice it uses specific terminology like unrestricted submarine warfare and Zimmermann telegram in the answer, because you do want to use specific terminology that we used in class in your answer. So this would definitely be a good answer. Another example, this one chooses the Zimmermann telegram as the most significant cause. It says the Zimmermann telegram galvanized Americans against Germany. The secret telegram, that goes on to explain what the Zimmermann telegram was in this answer, because you're supposed to explain it, and why it was the most significant. This was the most significant reason for the U.S. entering the war because politicians finally realized that Americans would support going to war against the Germans. So uses specific terminology, answers the question by explaining what it was and why it led to the war. Next one, you could have chosen the sinking of the Lusitania was the most significant cause of the U.S. eventually declaring war on Germany. And notice it says, although the sinking of the passenger liner with hundreds of Americans on board occurred in 1915, it caused the American public to realize the U.S. citizens would suffer even if they were not directly involved in the war. As you're answering these questions, you have to know your facts and know your terms, but you also really just have to say, okay, why? Well, why would the sinking of the Lusitania be a significant cause? And then find a way to word it in a way which explains why the sinking of Lusitania would be a cause. This German willingness to sink passenger ships, that's a spelling error there, sorry everybody. But this German willingness to sink passenger ships along with British propaganda helped foment a negative attitude toward Germany for the rest of the war and eventually led to the U.S. declaration of war. So you could really make an argument that any of those four causes was the most significant one. And as long as you've got evidence and you have logical reasoning to back it up, you'll be fine. Okay, so that was A. Let's now look at B. B was the more difficult of these questions. So let's take a look at how you might have answered that. You're going to use words like although and despite, and because you're doing kind of a compare and contrast. You're kind of looking at your first reason, but then saying another reason by why that was not as significant. So I got to make sure I'm doing that in all of my answers here. So let's check out this one. Although the Zimmermann telegram, in which the Germans promised U.S. territory to Mexico if they joined the war against the U.S., did infuriate Americans. So notice I'm trying to explain what it is. Very helpful to do that. It helps the reader, the teacher, know that you know what you're talking about. It did infuriate Americans. British propaganda had already turned American opinion against the war. So it's saying, yes, the Zimmermann telegram did have a role, but it was not as significant as British propaganda. It was inevitable that America would join the war against Germany anyway, especially after Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare. Therefore, British propaganda and unrestricted submarine warfare were more significant in the U.S. declaring war. So you see how I still explained one of the causes, yet said why it wasn't as significant as the other cause there. So let's look at another good answer. Although, notice another one that starts with although the sinking of the Lusitania, and here's an explanation, a British passenger line with hundreds of Americans on board, did turn American opinion against the Germans, it was not the most significant cause of the U.S. joining the war. After the incident, Germany promised that it would not target passenger ships anymore, and that pacified American opinion for the most part until they resumed unrestricted submarine warfare in 1917, which then led to the U.S. declaring war. So in its reasoning here, it's basically saying, yes, Lusitania was significant, but if it was that significant, the Americans would have declared war right away on Germany, and they waited for 2 years until Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, because the Germans actually for a while said, okay, we'll back off. So that in this answer is explaining why the Lusitania is not as significant as a couple of other answers. Let's take a look at one more. Oh, actually, no, let's not. Let's take a look at some student examples and see what we could have done differently with these. So let's take a look at this one is from you guys. The most significant reason for the U.S. declaring war on Germany was the naval blockades. The blockades from Germany stationed around Great Britain really affected their economy. They started, I like this. I like this individual is saying, hey, the primary reason for the U.S. declaring war was Germany was blockading American ships, which really affected, actually they're saying it affected Great Britain's economy. Now, hopefully they're saying it affected the U.S. economy, which it would have. They started running low on resources and needed help fast. The U.S. got word of this and started to help Great Britain with supplying them with resources, which was very significant in the war. I like how they use blockades. However, they're basically then saying we got involved to help Britain. And I don't know if that's exactly one of the reasons we gave you. It could work. It could get you some points here, but there's a couple of issues there. Secondly, the most significant reason, okay, this is another example here. The most significant reason the U.S. declared war on Germany was because of the rising aggression with their submarines. Previously, the USA had been keen to stay neutral. I like that. I like that terminology there. You enter